Hello and welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charmley. This is another Shropshire church. We're here up in the beautiful Shropshire Hills at St Paul's, Knowbury. And this is a church really of two parts. In 1840, a very simple church was built here. It was an area at the time the population was increasing due very largely to the quarries here and people moving in, families moving in to work at the quarries, and it was felt that a church was needed, and so a very simple building is erected in 1840. Unfortunately, it's put on a rather bad site and it's poorly built, and the result is that it begins to fall down, and within a decade it has to be closed, and they have to look at it and say, what can we do to shore it up a bit? In the 1880s, this church is then massively extended. So the original church only went as far as the chancel arch you can see behind me. A whole new chancel was put on. There's a big tower at the west end, vestry. In other words, it's all extended very largely around this original building. The original building still exists. And so it's a church of two parts, 1840 and 1880s. Oh, 1885, the new bits. It's not a very old building. It's a building of some interest, particularly in terms of how this very simple building has been turned into this big Anglo-Catholic parish church. I say big, it's no aisles, but it's still fairly large. Let's have a look around and again, as usual, look at the various important features. So as usual, we start at the west end here in the tower. Now, you will see there's some steps. There's the steps up from the tower and then further steps up in the chancel. This is because the church is built into the side of a hill, and so actually the steps follow to some extent the lie of the land. The font is interesting. It was a gift to the church. It clearly comes from somewhere else. We don't know where. Is it a reworked Norman font? It might be. Or is it an 18th century font or even 17th century font that's been made following Norman styles? We don't know. Nobody knows. But it's an interesting and rather unusual font. As I say, this is a church that's been done over very much by the Anglo-Catholics. We have at the back the War Memorial. It's a very impressive war memorial, reflecting to some extent the numbers killed, but also the importance of the war. You can see the Great War, 1914-18, behind the memorial altar, and then you have the memorial altar itself, and that's been painted with the names of those killed in the First World War. You'll notice again Welsh names: Edwards, Morgan, Humphreys, Jones, Welsh people who had moved into the area, or members of Welsh families who had moved into the area to work the quarries. The seating is bog standard 19th century. This, of course, is the original church here. Victorian stone pulpit, not one of the worst, and of course, because this is a basically Victorian church, we have a copy there of a Renaissance altarpiece. And again, more steps up and more steps up to the high altar. High altar indeed. Wrought iron screen, low wrought iron screen. Oh, worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Part of the thing about the Anglo-Catholics is going back to this idea in the Middle Ages that you've got holy places within the building, and so they screen off the chancel. This kind of screen is just saying that it is a special place. Organ, we've got let everything that hath breath praise the Lord. This was something of a joke, of course, because an organ is blown, so an organ to some extent has breath. And while those pipes in the front are, of course, dummies, you can see real pipes there along the side. It's got a decent organ. The console is just here, in fact. That's the console. The Reredos is this enormous triptych, enormous Victorian triptych, and behind we've got the east window, which is making a very definite statement. You've got sacrifice on the left-hand side, you've got Christ sacrifice in the middle, and then you've got the Mass on the right-hand side, and it will be the Mass. This is an Anglo-Catholic church, hence the chap is, of course, wearing his vestments, and in fact it's a medieval scene, and so the idea is this sort of continuity. We've got there's the triptych with Christ in majesty adored by saints and angels. Organ chamber really off on this side, and there's a rood, although there's no rood screen, there's a rood beam, and you've got your crucifix in the middle. We'll go and have a look there. You have here one of the more bizarre depictions of the Last Supper, because whatever the Last Supper was, it was not a communion service of the Anglican type, with people kneeling, as we're told that they were reclining at dinner. Wouldn't have, and Christ also would not have been wearing what appears to be a communion, Anglican type communion vestments. We've got choir stalls here with their emblems on the back, and we've got here the list of incumbents. The first is John James in 1841, and it's during the incumbency of Frederick Williams that the builder is rebuilt in its present form. As I say, this is built to serve a working class community, and the Anglo-Catholics are quite big on this kind of mission. That it's one of the reasons they have such an influence is that they're accepting livings and parishes that other people wouldn't. So here we go, there's the rood, and you have typical rood here. You've got the crucifix in the middle, and you've got the Virgin Mary and John the Apostle, John the Evangelist. A crucifix, strictly speaking, of course, has a figure of Christ on, otherwise it's just a cross. The media repeatedly makes the mistake, and not just the media, but particularly the media repeatedly makes the mistake of talking about crucifix when they mean cross, which always annoys me, but that's life. Again, worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness is the Anglo-Catholic sort of tendency. So in memory of my beloved husband, Dr. W.H. McGranahan, killed December the 11th, 1940, on his way to Ditterstone Quarries on an errand of mercy. Greater love hath no man than this. So it's a local doctor going out to help a patient, and he's killed, quite possibly run over, or otherwise an accident on the way. And here we have the memorial to Harry Oswald Watson, physician of Knowbury House near Ludlow, who for over 50 years ministered the needs of the people of this parish and succeeding district. He was church and vicar's warden for many years, and entered into arrest December the 18th, 1939, aged 80 years. So again, a local doctor, church warden. It's a very handsome church, and very different, because the original building would have terminated where the chancel arch is, and it would have been very much a more Protestant style of building. There would have been a gallery at the back, and of course there would have been no tower. We have here it's no longer really used for its purposes, but this is the old children's altar. Suffer little children to come unto me, and Christ receiving a group of little children. A very Anglo-Catholic imagery here. This is a special place where children can bring gifts of flowers, read or look at pictures, and speak in their hearts to God. It doesn't appear to be really much provision for that anymore, which is to some extent a shame. But there we are. Times change. Well, the old order changeth, giving place to new. So that's the inside here at St Paul's, Knowbury. And so we're now outside at St Paul's, Knowbury. This is a church very much of two phases, as I said, inside. You can see this lower roof line of the nave, and the tower and the chancel, which are both of the 1880s. The stonework is very obvious. The stonework of the nave is much more irregular, much more rubble, whereas you've got these carefully dressed and carefully coursed stones in the tower and the chancel. The tower and chancel to some extent hold the nave up, because they made a mistake from the original building, and it had to be closed, I say, within 10 years of opening, because it was starting to develop as Mr. Spurgeon put it, said both another building, devotional tendencies and prostrate itself, which you really don't want with a church. It's all right people inside to be prostrating themselves, but the church itself should not. So we'll have a look around the outside and again point out these important features to do with it, the two periods of Knowbury Church. The stone, of course, is all local. This is a quarry area, so you don't have to be buying in stone from a quarry. And you can see here, the tower does look as though part of it may be older, but the turret is certainly later. So maybe it did originally have a west tower. Or maybe the west tower was added at some point. You've got this wonderful, very different, tall roof line. The roof line of the nave is much lower. And it's to do with different views as to what is appropriate in terms of church architecture between the 1840s, or rather 1830s, and the 1880s. And you can see here very much that those rising steps inside the building do correspond to the rising ground outside. It's a very good site, it's on the edge of the hill, but it's a little bit steep, and that's what led to the original church starting to fall downhill. So I revised my comment, that tower is definitely older than the stair turret. I was misled by the stair turret, which is 1880s, so you've got a great big Anglo-Catholic chancel, and the building reflects the churchmanship and the ceremonies that went on inside, of course. Wooden porch, that too is 1880s, as the original entrance would have been through the tower, which would suggest that the font may have been, well, probably was somewhere else, but that font, of course, is a gift. It comes from somewhere else. And nice, yes, graveyard. It's not mown very often. One of the things, of course, is maintenance and mowing. You've got to pay somebody to do it, and if you can just keep it up in a semi-wild state like this, wildflower, you can say, well, we're doing this for the wildlife, which you are. But the fact that it saves money on mowing is an added bonus. So wade through the plants. There you've got the organ chamber, and there you've got the vestry. And as we come down this side, we'll see something that they don't have on the south side, but you have on the north side, which is a buttress. And that tells us that that buttress is a later addition, and it is by no means cosmetic. It's helping to hold the building up because they made a mistake with the original structure. And you can see this, it's a really good place to look at the contrast between the stonework actually. Here's the Victorian stonework, and here is the 1840 stonework. And look at that, such a difference between the two. Part of it's just changing fashions, because fashion has so much to do with these buildings, but also it's changing expectations. Is this going to be something that just has a little bit of imitation of the Middle Ages, or is it going to be something that is actually trying to look like a medieval church? Here's the vestry. The sort of Victorian church has a much greater emphasis on the vestry than other thing than earlier. And there's that tower rising up. Stone, as I said, not a problem here because this is a quarry area. The people who go to the church here are quarrymen and their families, and the people who then service the quarrymen, and things like teachers and postmaster, shopkeepers, this sort of thing. You can see there again the contrast in stonework and that clock there. So it's a very handsome building with this west tower. It looks a bit funny now with this vestry sticking out the side, but again, it's necessary for the functioning of the building, and the more things helping to hold that church up, the better. There's the war memorial outside. So there we have it, Knowbury. And so there is St Paul's, Knowbury. quarry church built. Never been a parish church here before, and it's an indication and a monument to how life changed in the Victorian era, and also this concern for providing parish churches. Now, part of it was, well, the Methodists will get the people otherwise, but another part was a genuine concern that the Anglican Church, the Church of England, was losing touch with the people whom it was supposed to be serving. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.